welcome to Canadian Herpetoculture podcast. My name is Brandon Milsham.
And I'm Kiana Fox.
Hopefully your internet's working today.
I don't know if it was mine or yours.
I don't know. I'm the host, but yeah. But
Phone's being weird. Hello, everybody. It might just be
yeah. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another live stream of Canadian Herpetoculture podcast. On today's episode of Whose Hemipenes Are We Grabbing? It's going to be Kai, Fan or Pan. I'm not sure. I didn't. Yeah, Fan.
He's nodding at us.
Probably. We're going to be talking about some parthenogenic monitors and some other stuff that he keeps. I know there's not a whole lot of mangrove species on monitors in Canada, but Kai definitely knows some people who keep them here, and he'll be able to share some information about breeding, his experience keeping them, and other aspects of some other animals that he has. So this will be a really cool topic to talk about, especially the parthenogenesis. I think that's how it's pronounced. Yeah, parthenogenic monitors and how that works. So we'll introduce Kai.
Ta-da!
Hello.
Yo.
Did I butcher your last name?
It's okay. I'm used to it. At least what I it's fine. I just don't like being called Kyle.
I get called Keanu, and I could
I can stab you.
Someone. Yeah. Brandon changed my name to Keanu for in our chat for a little while. I was like, I'm not even looking at it because every time I get mad, I hate it.
Nope. You can go.
How long have you been keeping just monitors in general?
Dang. I guess ever since I really started. So it'd be like flea market, being a little kid in the city, and there's a flea market place, and it was actually my friend's friend that his parents owned it, and they sell puppies, and they sold a bunch of iguanas and little turtles, but they had a little now monitor. And I didn't buy it. Don't get me wrong. I didn't do anything then. I didn't really own monitors until a little bit older, but I would play with it and I would let it bite me. And I was 10 or 11 years old. And so really that was like one of my introductions into monitor lizards, other than, watching like Steve Irwin and stuff like that. But, it's like, and then I basically moved to another city called Sunnyvale, where there was a reptile store there called Sunnyvale Reptiles. And basically start volunteering there, and I still don't own any monitors. And I'm, like in middle school, so I obviously can't afford it. And my parents obviously think it's way too much.
I think your hand's on your mic.
Oh, is it?
I'm not sure. No, it sounds like you're in a fishbowl.
Yeah.
Oh, what about now?
No.
No.
I don't know what happened there, but
it's weird. Oh.
Now?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We're cool.
Now.
That was
all right. Okay.
We have a new technical difficulty every show.
So yeah, basically, do I need to start over? Or?
We could hear you. It just sounds really funny.
Oh, okay. So yeah, and basically, I still don't own any monitors. I'm still in middle school, and I'm basically just taking care of the monitor lizards that are at this pet store that I work at. So really, they're mine until they're sold, and I'm just working with them and playing with them. And really, the introduction to monitors was still the non monitor. There was a very, very aggressive one at the store. No one wanted to work with it, but I was able to get it to tame down in a sense and be tolerant and stuff like that. So really, it's that was getting into monitors at 12 or 13 or right around middle school, and really taking off from there. I started owning some probably in high school, like sophomore year and junior year, and I was taking them to bring into class and giving like show and tell type stuff, and yeah, that's kind of where it started a little bit for me, anyways. And yeah, it's then I really got into keeping monitors just like on a one-on-one basis. I ended up not working at the store anymore and just going off and doing my own thing, but I would always have a monitor or two, really just like one or two. And then I think in 2011, I would try a certain species called sand monitors. They're Varanus flavirufus, but these ones are crossed with Argus. In the industry, they call them tri-crosses, just because they're mixed with Goldii, Varanus flavirufus, and Argus monitor. So all three of those is what makes the tri-cross in America. And it's essentially, all those three mixed together and sold as a very, very gorgeous, small, medium-sized monitor. And I tried to breed them, failed miserably, literally killed the female. I killed the female, not the male, but the female literally died in my hands maybe like 2 or 3 months after introduction to the male. To be honest, I just thought that they would be as simple as just plugging in anything. But it was much more complicated than that. I really didn't have. I actually, the breeding part is simple, but the support is very, very difficult. Where if you don't support a female well enough, not just with food or heat or calcium, but nesting options, and or a place where she's very, very comfortable to lay those eggs without a male around. And so I just put them together, thought they'd do their thing. She'd just lay and he'd leave her alone. But she had some type of egg developed complications. And basically, I really still to this day don't really know what happened. I did myself a little, at-home necropsy where I just cut up the animal, pulled out the organs, and asked another person what happened, kind of. And somewhere along the lines of development in the eggs, something ruptured. And essentially, then the animal just bled out inside. There was blood everywhere, though. When I opened the animal. Yeah, and so that broke my heart a little bit, and it really got me to think about the animal. Because I try with a lot of effort, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, but also a lot of money. And so you kind of want to, if you're going to try to do it, you want to learn how. And so I tried very, very hard, learning through other people's mistakes and learning through their successes as well. And I'm literally a product of 10, 15, 20 years of people failing and then slowly progressing as the years come. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, or even 5 years ago, monitors wasn't like how it is today. A lot more species are being capture bred, and there's a lot more light shed on the whole topic of keeping them alive in captivity. As that grows and people catch on more and more and more, the right way to do things, essentially more people have success. It's just basically an open book rather than having secrets and people not really telling you, even though they're successful themselves, they'd rather keep the success to themselves.
I was 8 years old when my dad got our first monitor. If I knew what I knew now about keeping any species of animal, I would have choked the life out of my family for the way that animal was kept. But we didn't know better at the time.
Yeah.
He was sold as a yellow spotted tegu. That thing was not any kind of tegu. That thing was absolutely a monitor. I've tried to figure it out for quite a while. I'm fairly certain it was an Argus monitor, a very young one. His enclosure was made out of wood and chicken wire. His substrate was rabbit pellets. He had a human heat pad buried. Like, it was awful. And like, he did not last long. Yeah, and like he did not last long. That was how the pet store told us to keep him, and he was dead within months. And I thought that's how reptile keeping was, but now keeping is advanced so far that hopefully animals aren't dying like that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, there's still a good ratio of them passing and casualties along the way, which is, you know, a very, very sour subject. You know, just to say that it's just a part of the thing and just turn a blind eye at it, it's very, very hard for me to do. I really, really, truly, I adore the species that I work with. You know, they're different. Not to say that they're like me or mistreated or, you know, misunderstood, but man, like we share a very, very a lot of similar life complexes where, you know, it's like, man, finding acceptance or something like that. Same thing with these monitors is, when are people really going to give these monitors a real chance? You know, and so really, that's why I've tried to share with many keepers all over the world, not just Canada or Europe or something like that, but in Australia, there's a gentleman that I talk to over there quite regularly, and we share information. He's a stone's throw away from the continent that my monitors are from, and so he'll be able to give me a lot better insight. And there's also Australian species of mangrove monitors that exist, and so that's the species he keeps. And so we all share information back and forth, and literally, hopefully, I can, you know, help them get their breeding process going. And people really don't, they're not going to follow you or they're not going to listen to you until you show them some success. You know, regardless on how well you know things or how well your name's established, until they start seeing, you know, actual babies hatch out and the whole process even broken down to them where they can understand, they're not really going to listen at all. And so getting, you know, what I've learned and then getting what these other keepers have learned, and basically all of us kind of, I'm not sure, collectively sharing information, you know, that's the best thing that we can really do at this point to keep them from dying so much. But, you know, it costs a lot for me to breed them, to be honest. It literally costs thousands of dollars for just one of the animals to eat during a process, right? And so, you know, picture 10 animals. And so we have to charge quite a bit, and just to barely break even. While some of these animals, savannas, Niles, cheap water monitors, mangroves are in there, Argus are still in there, and these are wild caught animals that come very cheap. And so the value of trying to fight with the wild caught price is very, very difficult.
Yeah.
Most people would rather still buy a wild caught animal and do it with, you know, they're not that they're cheap or whatever, they just don't know better. And so they're obviously trying to save, because who doesn't want to save? Everybody wants to save money. And
well, like a $20 Savannah monitor is an easy buy when, you know, the black throat at the table beside it is $650. Exactly. What do you think everyone's going to buy? The $20 Savannah.
Yeah. And, you know, really it's those monitors, they really haven't kept any value, only even though some of them are somewhat regularly captive bred. Like, you know, some people breed savannas quite regularly, not often, but it happens every year or two, and people share that information. But man, sometimes it just lands on I think the saying is deaf ears, or, you know, it doesn't really resonate with a lot of people as far as, man, like, we have to keep these animals a certain type of way. It has changed a lot, you know, in savanna groups. People are feeding their animals a much more invertebrates rather than just mice, you know, trying to keep them a lot hotter. But, you know, there's still a lot of things about the species, about, like, let's say savannas, right? Or African species alone. The species in Africa basically go through much different temperature climate changes than, let's say, Indonesia. Indonesia stays very constant, you know.
Yeah.
It stays quite hot and humid throughout all of the year. And maybe they have a dry season, but it's still hot. Now in Africa, you know, they go through essentially a really, really dry period, and then they have this monsoon, very, very wet season. And so then, like, estivation or brumation, or there's another word for it, where these monitor lizards are basically spending months in the ground, not really doing much, basically hibernating in a sense. And so these aren't practices practiced in captivity, not yet anyways. Maybe a person does it here and there a little bit, but for the most part, people aren't really keeping females alive for very, very long at all. Savannas or any species of monitor, really. And, that's where a lot of us try to come in and really, really speak with some of the new keepers. I try to work with a lot of keepers myself, whether they're new or they just need help with a certain aspect in their project, and that'll really get their gears going. And that's sometimes all that people really need is just a little help. That's why I do these podcasts, whether they're frequent or not. A lot of people tune in and maybe they'll learn something or catch something or,
That's why we like doing them. Whether someone tunes in for the whole episode or not, there's so much information being shared, they're at least going to catch something.
Yep, and it might inspire some of the experienced keepers to eventually get into mangroves, or it might inspire somebody who was thinking about getting into monitors, get something, and they learn some stuff from these podcasts, which is great because neither of us know a lot of information about monitors in general, so they're getting this information to other people is great.
Yeah. The whole monitor thing, period, it's a lot to gather at once. Don't get me wrong.
Oh, yeah.
Even to gather within months, it's a lot. It's not enough time. Someone would to learn a lizard properly, you're gonna have to go through almost every single life period of it, from the very beginning to learn what their stages of life are, to what they are as juveniles, and then as an adult, they're basically an entirely different thing to take care of. Little ones are very simple to keep. You don't have to really do a whole lot just because they don't need to breed yet. But man, when they're breeding and they're adult size and they're 2 to 3 years old, or adequate size, and they're going at it and laying eggs, those females need maybe a foot or two of soil. Each of my nest bins alone are a good 2x2s or 3x3s. I even have one that's 4x2x2 for a 4-foot mangrove monitor, and that's her nest bin.
And that's the size of some people's enclosures.
Right,
Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
Yeah, they take up a lot of space.
They do, right. If you want to do it the right way, now you have to keep them hot, right? I mean, that's what people say about monitors, but you have to keep them hot in that corner of the cage or that third of the cage, but the rest of the enclosure is kind of more cool. It's in the 80s or maybe even low 90s, but that one hot side is like 120,
Yeah, that's how this cage right here is set up right now. And this side is way more humid than the other one.
Right. And so
this side down here.
And basically with the amount of room that you have to have, it's important, so that way you can give them what we call optimum temperatures, and it's just the availability to go wherever they want at whatever time they feel like it, whether they want to feel cooler, or let's just say like today it's 100 degrees and most of my lights are off, but let's say my lights aren't off and I'm not here, I'm out of town or I'm far away, I can't come home to just turn stuff off, and the lights are on and the temperature is blazing hot outside. The lizard can literally go to the very, very far corner where it's cool and 75 degrees and basically save its life and cool down. But on the very, very opposite end, it has the option to get very, very hot if it wants to. That's the real proper way to really keep monitors. Some people just want to keep them hot all over the cage, and that's it's almost too hot and too stimulating for them. You want to allow some part of the cage to cool down, or part of the day where the cage does get to 75 or 80 degrees.
Yeah, you want some thermal regulation, because that way they can monitor their own temperature, because they know what their optimal inside core temperature needs to be to operate properly, and digest all the food and do what they normally do.
Right.
My monitor's just basking right now. He'll start zipping around here within the next hour, probably.
Yeah,
He's pretty routine.
My guys are barely, like, because of the way the weather is, they're a little conflicted on what to do. So, it's also a little weird because at any given time, there's always heat or lights on in my room. Like right now, there is a good period where things are off, but it's still gonna be like blazing hot, and so they're really I don't know what it is, not agitated, but they're active as hell. All of them are. Even the shy ones are out, and they're not always out. So it's pretty weird to watch.
Has there been a pretty significant weather change for you? Like I'm from Canada, so I imagine California is like always hot.
Yeah, so no, it actually has been. So it does get hot here, like, just to say it's 100 degrees. It's a very random. Our weather has been very stupid. I would say back and forth a lot. So, what springtime should have really started, I'd say like beginning of March, sometimes like end of February, beginning of March. But our last cold week was just last week, and it was, down to the 40s and 50s. But now all of a sudden we're back to 70s and 80s and stuff like that. So it's going to stay consistent now, but for the last month or two, it's been very, very finicky. Random hot days. And even in the end of February, I was like, man, there's these random 80 degree days. I think spring is coming. And really it's back to 60s and 70s and really, really cold temperatures. The mountains here where I live currently, the mountains are snowing. And so basically where we're at, it's kind of like the desert, but the mountain tops are so high that there are still snow caps up there. So the weather for me is very, very, very off. I haven't really grabbed or really grasped how it's going to be consistent. All I know is that it's going to get really, really hot, and I don't really know what to really do other than just turn off my lights and figure out a different lighting system. So the drasticness in the last week or so, yes, but how finicky it's been, man, it's been pretty tough for the last month or two.
Yeah, because you mentioned before that you have your lights on an inverted light cycle to help with the heat right now.
Right. And so that the way that is all the lights are typically off during the daytime, all of them. And I have them on at nighttime to basically help with this amount of heat going on throughout the day. And so let's say if they were to be on, and during the heat of the day, basically my cages would peak so much, and the thermostats would basically turn the bulbs off and on every couple minutes. You don't really want that to go off and do that too much. So that'll also keep your animals from having proper basking temperatures, and your lights are going to be off at nighttime anyway, so they don't really have a chance to bask. So with the way the system is right now, it's their nighttime. It's cool, but it's still warm though. So it's still hot. And then they have their lights on at nighttime, and it doesn't really mess with the daytime temperatures like how it would. It doesn't really mess with the temperatures like how it would in the daytime. So it's pretty much pretty consistent now. But I don't know how it'll be in another couple months from now when the temperatures are 110 or something like that. Because where I live, it's gonna get that hot. I know for sure.
So are all your enclosures indoors, or do you have some outdoor enclosures?
I don't have any outdoors yet. I have outdoor grasshopper enclosures, but I don't have any outdoor mangrove enclosures. For one, I don't trust my mangroves. I also don't trust myself if I'm gonna grow it right or build it right.
Yeah.
Give me 1 second. I have about 100 baby grasshoppers hatching out. I just want to put them in the right bin. Oh, don't jump! Don't jump!
Crickets are my nightmare fuel. one of them jumps at me and I'm screaming. Oh, I hate feeding crickets to anything. I'll make like contraptions so I can load them full of crickets, and it's like a slow feeder for my animals, so I don't have to deal with crickets.
Yeah, so here's some of my stuff outdoors. I'm outside right now, and you can see how beautiful the sky is.
It looks absolutely beautiful.
Oh, it does.
Yeah, and then here are some grasshoppers, and they do this like stampede where they just fly. Well, they're not doing it now. That's weird. But they do this thing where they just basically fly back and forth in the cage, kind of going nuts.
Oh, there they go.
There we go.
Yeah. So these are my
big.
adults.
Those are really big, yeah.
They're roughly the size of my finger, give or take. That's not even the biggest ones I have. I have some species that are a little bit bigger than that one. And here's some of my younger ones. And yeah, they kind of I don't know. They're not doing the stampede now. They're making me look stupid right now, but
because it's hot.
Right. No, actually, when it's hot, they usually do it even more. They lose control and they just jump around. And so, but yeah, I guess I don't want them to do it too much. But see, though, this is I'm now, just because of the way it's been and the weather's changed, I'm now just luckily I get to hang out at home for most of the day, and so I get to really pay attention to the weather. Now the weather has been so hot that I'm just trying to make sure that I buffer and do everything within my collection to make sure everything is not too hot. I have some stuff that are very, very temperature sensitive, like silkworms and the grasshoppers should be able to handle the temperatures. I just don't think they can sit in direct sunlight.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that I have to do, which basically study the weather. With it being not consistent, I basically am at a loss whenever the weather happens to change its mind on its own. One day the weatherman will tell me that it's going to be 75, and then all of a sudden the next is going to be 90. And so yeah, having to make sure that I don't miss something is very, very important. It happens a lot when you have so much going on,
Yeah. Why did you choose to grow out and feed grasshoppers over some other insects? Is it because they're just larger, or are they better, higher protein and better nutritional content, or?
All of that, all of the above. I would say first would be because one of my mentors, his name is Daniel Bennett, and he just passed away like last month. And he was a savanna monitor enthusiast. He never kept them. I don't think he's ever kept them in captivity, but he studied them in Africa. And so
that's really cool.
He would report back to us, and basically he'd be the database and where a lot of people go to get savanna monitor info, to try to apply it to captivity. And that's what he did. He saw a lot of that. I mean, as far as the forefront of monitor keeping and to really back up, monitors, he was one of the greatest. He saw how many would be imported every year, and he also saw how many would live. And the number is very, very, it's sad. It's maybe, out of the thousands or hundreds of thousands that get imported, only a very small fraction of those make it to adulthood. And what we were trying to do was, with the grasshoppers, or just to introduce other feeders other than just mice, or just roaches. We're trying to do something that's a large feeder, but he also found a large locust and a large grasshoppers inside the gut of a lot of the savanna monitors that, they would find dead on the road, or they would catch, and for science, they have to kill and just study, So when you open up the gut of the animal and you really see that there's a lot of these grasshoppers in there and stuff like that, this was basically sort of like a calling, or more so of I got to give it a try. And so I talked to him about it. I talked to other keepers about it, and I was trying to keep them, but I would fail miserably. Actually, we actually failed miserably for the first year or two, just trying to get them to breed or trying to get them to hatch out correctly, and then also still capitalize on them not killing each other and doing all that stuff. So all of those, we failed quite. It was just me and my partner, which his name is Dean, and Daniel Benya wasn't really breeding at all. He was just on the sidelines, really just talking to us about the monitors and discussing other things like other, I guess, arthropods that they'd be eating in the wild, or like isopods, large isopods that they'd be eating, or millipedes, and things like that. So, all those kind of related to like shrimp, right? Shrimp and isopods are related.
Yeah.
And so, that's why we try to get people to feed more shrimp too, or some seafood into their savanna diet. And so that's why I really do the grasshoppers, just because I want to give another option than just mice. Size-wise too, like if I were to compare a large grasshopper to an adult dubia, obviously the size of the grasshopper is bigger, but the amount of meat and shell in comparison to those two things, even though the grasshopper is larger, it has less shell and more meat. So you don't have to worry about like blocking up your monitors, or when they eat too many big dubias, you can see after they poop there's a lot of shell that's basically being undigested because the chitin in the shell is just so hard. And with these grasshoppers, I actually don't deal with that at all. I've seen my dwarf monitors defecate without a problem, and I've seen my big monitors. And most big monitors don't go after roaches anymore. They feel like that's inadequate, or the roaches are too small. With these grasshoppers, because of how big they are,
it's still enticing.
They basically still very enticing, and they fly and they jump, and so they're much more enticing for the animal, 100%. Now, like let's say pros and cons.
Keeps the animals up.
You're right. It keeps the animals really, really. I mean, active. For a board monitor lizard, chasing a grasshopper is everything.
It's like watching a puppy chase a butterfly.
Yeah, exactly. And so with as far as getting any of them to eat and work with the grasshoppers, it's been quite simple. My biggest monitor still loves to eat them. And so now it's a comparison with grasshoppers and like crickets, right? Pros and cons. Grasshoppers don't smell. Even as adults, they don't chirp. They don't bite, and they don't hide like crickets do. So when you put in crickets, they basically hide underneath all your cork and in between everything.
Yeah.
The grasshoppers, they gravitate to light because they're a diurnal species, and so they'll literally hang right around your heat lamp. So they makes ease for anything to catch it.
Active monitor.
Yeah.
It's going to be basking in the sun, so
exactly. The food's right there. And so for chameleon people love it the best because chameleons don't go down to the ground to eat too often, and the grasshoppers gravitate right to the light and making things very simple. But if you were to put a bunch of dubias or a bunch of crickets inside a chameleon cage, they'll go all the way to the bottom, hide underneath stuff, and basically make it impossible for the chameleon to eat it successful.
Oh, I ended up having crickets breeding in my savanna monitor enclosure because so many of them had.
Yeah. Now, with the grasshoppers, I also want to kind of destroy the stigma. I'm a little bit every month by month. It gets better and better and better, and more people I get more interest rather than a lot of people like, oh, they're toxic or they're very, very invasive, or they bite because they see how a set of grasshoppers or a set of locusts can destroy a tree. But that's a tree. They're not carnivorous though. So just those alone, I just really want to kind of tear down the stigma a little bit, and people are seeing that their animals are, they show very, you can tell when your animal likes a food item over another.
Oh,
Yeah, absolutely.
It responds differently. It jumps differently. It actually hits things with much more vigor when it likes it, and we can tell. And so I utilize that for just about everything. It was at first I was giving it away for free to savannah keepers, but then more and more people were getting into them, and they wanted to try to breed them or use them for their own feeders, like for their chameleons and stuff. And basically, it took off, and it hasn't settled since. So
That's awesome. I hope that the legal roaches that we found we can keep up here can take off like that.
yeah,
It'd be great to be able to at least offer another different type of food source, because we have crickets, superworms, and like we can pay out the ass if we want hornworms, waxworms, or
silkworms and stuff.
silkworms,
Yeah.
butterworms. They're really, those ones are all really, really expensive to feed, so it's hard to
They are.
offer a really good variety.
Yeah, especially
Yeah,
for
they cost a
insectivore
lot.
animals.
The silkworms themselves, they cost a lot to make. I mean, they cost a lot. Like the food itself, the bag of food cost me $200
Holy
Wow,
crap.
that's crazy.
That's
for
American.
10 pounds. Like
Wow.
that's a lot. That's a lot of money for some food. So
That's like almost $400 here.
yeah.
All the Canadian dollars.
Now, as far as like, the type of people or the stuff that goes on with monitors, and we just want to really get people to see the respect that they have to draw within themselves to deliver to the animals. Like
Yeah.
it's to say. I mean, I don't really want to like make it too complicated for people to understand, but man, it's just to respect the animal a little bit, give it some space, really try to understand it. And if you really put the work in, which any great successful thing takes a lot of hard work,
Absolutely.
Takes a lot of passion and a lot of frustration, and then hopefully you get to the understanding after you try to plug in and plug out answers. But the monitors, if someone were to really get into it, and anybody that was new and getting into the species nowadays, there's a lot of great helpers out there, a lot of great keepers out there. There are scum too, but there are a lot of good people out there that are willing to help. And there's almost every single species has been touched upon nowadays. There's a couple species that are almost impossible to work with, but nowadays you're able to get a lot of help, and it may not be somewhere in your local vicinity, but you may have to reach out through the internet and go to another country to ask people. And literally I've like picked up different languages or different not just language barriers, but just ways to communicate with people, because people communicate and words mean different things in every country, even though they're the same word. And so yeah, it's been really, really opening for me. I mean, like just like this, I've never thought that I'd be doing a Canadian podcast, but it's pretty cool. Not only that, I literally talk to Cody like every day, like 100 times a day. Me and him are just back and forth with his lizards and my lizards, and we're just trying to share, get things going with his stuff. That way, because I guess your Canadian market. Not to say that you guys don't have your own, but the Canadian and American, not that we're sharing stuff, but you guys are getting a lot of stuff from us, or we're getting some stuff from you. And so information too, not just animals or not just things in that. So, we just want to make this thing where it's not just because you're from America, we can only help you. We want to work with everybody, and to get that going in Canada, where there's a stable monitor grounds, like I mean, just the practice and any of the I guess the mental work that you're using with monitors, you can apply to almost everything that is in with reptiles, So it's definitely something to grasp on, because your guys' market out there, or the amount of people, is very, very limited. You guys do have good people, but they're very, very far and few between.
Yeah, in Canada we have 35-ish million people compared to the States where you just got 300 and some million people. So our market's a lot smaller.
Right. Yeah,
so,
and the weather here too. It's like people want to keep things, but where you guys are, I'm pretty sure it's colder for part of the year, right?
Yeah, it's cold 6 to 8 months out of the year, depending where you are.
Yeah. So thinking about it, keeping reptiles in a cold place, it's very, very difficult.
Well, we definitely don't have. We lost Kai.
Yep. Yeah. Well, we'll try to get him back here shortly. But yeah, there's a lot of difference between their climate and our climate, especially depending where you are in the States, because some places where people are there, they have a similar climate, and not a lot of people keep monitors there. But in warmer climates like where Kai is, or Florida and stuff like that, it's a lot easier for people to. Oh, there he is.
He's back.
All right.
We lost you.
Sorry about that. So what happened?
We were just talking about how we can't do things like have outdoor enclosures like you can in places like California and Florida, stuff like that.
Yeah, just the different climates, and that also really affects how people keep monitors too, or any species of animal, because you're going to have to work around different temperatures that fluctuate throughout the year, your temperatures in your home, how your home heats and cools as well. So it's not just a plug and play type deal. It's kind of, you got to figure things out.
Like where you and I are in the country, we have like really, really dry air. So having humid enclosures requires a little bit of extra work. Where if you go to lower mainland Vancouver, that's an actual tropical rainforest.
Yeah.
Where it doesn't even snow there. It rains and people have panic attacks, So I think Alberta, or not Alberta, Canada has every climate or thingy climate.
We have quite a few various climates, because we have like small deserts and stuff like that, and the rainforest over in BC and stuff like that. So, but it varies too where you are in the country. Same with anywhere, even in the States. It's the environment varies. So
with like how the mangroves have kind of taken off, there's been a major popularity, not just in America but in Canada too,
and even in Europe.
Yeah. So there's a lot of guys that are basically messaging me everywhere or everything, and trying to see if I can ship out that way, or if I know anybody in Canada that has mangroves. And I'm asked out. I don't really know anybody out there that has them for sale like that, And so I think getting that too, where getting a certain person, maybe we can meet down the line, that is willing to go through the effort and start importing, or however that works. I'm pretty sure there are people already, but we don't know them yet. So.
Well, there's a lot of monitors that get imported from Europe,
right?
And Indonesia.
Nice guys.
Yeah.
I know there's a couple importers that do Indo imports every couple of years, or every year anyway. And I'm not sure how many monitors get on that import. So, but I do know that they come. So I know last year John got an import of Indos. I think it was last year.
Ashley imports monitors every now and then.
Yeah, and then like, let's say when they're very inconsistent like that,
it makes it harder.
It makes it very hard. For one, there's no standing market or anything, but finding a opposite sex of the same locality, very, very hard. Yeah, it makes it very hard.
You basically have to follow the importers really closely and wait till they announce something and tell them, like, I'm looking for this and this. Is it available?
Yeah, and half the times the importers
Yeah.
don't even like you paying that much attention to them, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, they're
Yeah.
more secretive than anything just because of the regulations and everything, or they don't want people messing with them really. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So with the mangroves, how many locales are there of them?
oh man, that's an impossible question to answer. Look, there's a locality for every island over there.
Oh
So,
wow.
I mean, okay, from Solomon Islands off and then off the coast of Australia as well, within like PNG right there, right? Okay, so all that has types of mangrove monitors. I mean, other monitors too, but they have Australian blues. They have Kai Island, which is not too far from Australia, which is it's off of like southwest of Papua New Guinea. Okay, and so within that whole gap of water right there, they're not too far from Australia. Now Solomon Island would be up to the right a little bit, and then all of those islands have mangrove monitors on them. Now, even on the same island, they can look completely different.
Oh yeah.
Now let's go all the way left to the Philippines and Guam. I believe those are introduced, but they've been there for so long that they're basically Philippines and Guam mangrove monitors now. And so that's I believe as far left as they go though. Don't quote me, but they may be on small islands that we don't know about that people don't record, but because of the diversity and everything like that, we really only get a couple brought into the United States, and they're mostly Solomon Island, but there are few that come in from Indonesia, and I myself have 3 from Kai Island. Now the Kai Island ones are probably most desired just because they keep the big spots like croc monitors, so they have huge yellow spots. They're a little bit different as well as far as color and everything too, but they're a type of mangrove monitor. They're just a little bit different. Now, classification and everything like that needs to be 100% redone, literally. Like because there's so many. I mean, I have myself, sure, they're all mangrove monitors, but I have about 6 just right here. Like there's 6 localities. I have Solomon Island. I have Solomon Island of 2 color forms. I have Indonesian, probably from Biak, that's about 5 feet long. My Solomon Islands are only 3 feet, and they have pink tongues, while this one from Indonesia has a blue tongue. Okay. Now my Solomon Islands are tiny, and they're mature at 1.5 years. The Indonesian took 3 years before she started laying eggs.
Wow.
And so then the Kai Islands, I have 2 that are very, very similar with black and yellow, and then another Kai Island that is basically blue. And so she doesn't even look much like the normal Kai Islands that I have. So she's probably from another part of the island. And that's where, things get very, very complicated now, even more because of their island hoppers. So they may not even have originated from there. It could have been some tsunami that took them on a log and floated them that way, and so who knows? And then they're there and then they mix, and that's what creates somewhat of the complication between figuring out exactly which ones are from which. They're like, if you go to Kai Island, you would find these, but chances are in a neighboring island somewhere not too far, you're going to find something that's way different, but the island is not too far at all.
Yeah.
And so, it's just very, very complicated. The way I'm explaining it hopefully kind of breaks it down a little bit by, there's animals that are just imported, but the ones that aren't imported, man, there's so many. Like there's obviously Biak and Sarong and many of the locales that you hear already, like with green trees or carpet pythons, or you're already familiar with those, like Biak, right? Yeah. Biak is typical green tree, but there's also mangrove, right? And so there's mangrove monitors that come from there, and so there's Maruke, or there's Jayapara. There's so many that we're familiar with, and so basically we just got to basically put a mangrove monitor there, and now within the colors, like Wos, I'm gonna butcher this one, but it's spelled Wasior, Wosior, but that's a locality of mangrove that I've been wanting in the States, but I've never been able to find, and it's never been imported, or it hasn't been in years. So, that one has a lot of yellow and a lot of whites that come in, while there's, like on Rennell Island, there's a monitor called Just Indicus, and it's basically the biggest mangrove that there is. These guys get like 6 feet, and
Wow.
right, and they actually don't have a completely lateral pressed tail. The tails are more rounded for this species, right? It's not exactly like a swimming type. I'm pretty sure it's swimming and some other stuff too. And so just to give you an idea on how complicated it is, it's something that I haven't even scratched the surface of yet. I mean, I'm barely scratching it. Like, and I can barely even identify the locality, because when they're born, they're one look. They're dark with little spots. But when they're adults, they're a matrix pattern. There's no spots. And so the animal looks completely different unless you track that animal, kept it, have video and photo log of every single time it's changed its pattern. And then you can kind of try to, then you have a clear fact that that's that animal and that's what it looks like now. But man, that's the very, very confusing part. I believe that you call that parthenogenic, where they basically go from one look and then they change completely as adults and juveniles,
Yeah.
And so that right there is a much big complication as well. When an animal is a year old and they're a mangrove monitor, they already look way different than what they were as a baby. And as adult, man, it just looks way more different. So it's really, really difficult. When they're all adults, every single mangrove monitor, like from Biak or from Solomon Island or from Jayapara, they have a black background with usually yellow dots, but all that fragments, and all of them kind of look the same when they're adults. So, who's to really know what exactly is which? So, yeah, it's kind of difficult. I myself have quite a few, and but there's way more out there.
It's absolutely amazing how they've managed to get to all these different islands and managed to produce their own localities.
Yeah, and to think about it, like, how bull snakes and pine snakes, they can integrate, right?
Yep.
And sometimes you can even find them within the same natural range, right?
Yeah, and naturally hybridizing.
Exactly. So this is, in a sense, very similar. I'd say. I'm not to place the same thing that's working with the patoaphist on monitors, but the way how they're just divided, but they're still very similar. They can probably all cross in some way,
So,
yeah, what was that?
Do you cross your localities at all, or do you just breed within your localities?
I do. So, don't get me wrong, I want to keep things very pure, but finding pure or finding the opposite locality same locality but opposite sex is very hard.
Yeah.
So I have pure locality breeding of the Solomon Island, and I have pure locality of the Kai Island pairs, but my Indonesian, I haven't been able to find a male, and I haven't been able to find one definitely big enough. So basically, this girl, I've crossed her with a Kai Island, and that's my recent clutch that I just hatched out maybe 3 weeks ago. And they're gorgeous, actually. They're a complete complete 50% blend of both mom and dad. But here's the differences though. So the dad the Kai Island type, they have a pink tongue and they're a little bit smaller. But this Indonesian type has a blue tongue and she's a lot bigger. She's even bigger than the male. So, and the male that I have, as breeding them together, they just blended perfectly where the tongues are half and half.
Oh, that's cool.
That's
Yeah,
really
and
cool.
they have dad's head pattern, mom's tongue, and they have mom's back pattern, but then they have dad's side flanks. So yeah, it's a little bit of, it's definitely not like a morph where it's, it has the hidden genetics or anything like that. They're just straight up blended.
Just a mix of localities.
Yeah, just the mix of the localities.
It's like with the lychee geckos, you'll see them advertised. If they're across localities, people usually put that in there.
Right.
So it seems to be pretty similar with mangroves then.
Yeah, now that's what I've come to, but I haven't just crossed them all. I've really only had this one case of crossing them. I'm gonna try to continually do the peer line breeding just so I can have peer ones and not so many mutts. It also keeps the price up, but also at the same time, the person trying to breed them later on may not be able to because they're mutts or something like that. So now with mixing some of them don't even complement each other the way I look at it, like the Kai Island mixed with the Solomon Island probably wouldn't look too pretty at all, just because of the way the Kai Island and the Solomon Island have way different patterns. Now, as far as like me mixing the Indonesian with the Solomon Island also probably won't be a very good look just because of the color combinations. They're not even the same, so I don't even know what it would look like. But as far as the ones I did cross, they basically had high orange, high yellow, high green, and those are the colors that I'm trying to achieve. Right, that's exactly it. Yeah. So that's
Cody
that's the thing, right?
This is stunning. Absolutely beautiful animal. And
it's kind of nuts that I actually hatched them out. They've only before this last clutch, they've all been parthenogenic, and so I've just got a female, or I've had these females, and they'll lay for me maybe 3 times a year. Most of the time, 1 or 2 egg goes the distance, even though she's never been paired.
Yeah.
That was before. Now everything has been paired, so nothing is really parthenogenic anymore. But before, the females were alone, and they'd guaranteed they'd never made it or anything like that.
So, was it just one female giving you partho eggs, or did you have a couple doing it?
2.
2. Wow.
2 different females.
I'm wondering if it's more pronounced in this species of monitor, or
I take it as I only had girls in my room at one point.
Yeah.
And so this, not to say that that's the complete science behind it or the exact reason, but they believe that when a female monitor goes to a new island and there's no other existing of her kind, she'll have a parthenogenic clutch, and that one will be a male. All of them that I've hatched out so far have turned out to be males. So that part is true. Now the science to that is the male is supposed to breed back to the female and then basically start their own little thing.
That's genius.
Right. But I've tried to prove it out. I have my very first parthenogenic hatchling. He's around 2 years old now. And he is he's putting in a lot of work with his mom and other females as well, but I'm only getting half fertile clutches. So I have to figure out if it's fertility or if it's me, if I'm not doing something right. So far, in my looking at how I keep things, if they're laying parthenogenic, I probably am doing stuff right.
Yeah, I
Um,
would agree with you there. I think you're
right.
okay.
Yeah, and so now what they've a couple other keepers have told me, and these are like really renowned. Um, they're keepers that are also scientists and very well respected, like Quetzal of Costa Rica. He mentioned that parthenogenic monitors typically are basically half par to, asexually bred or sexually bred animals. Um, I'm not sure what it is. Maybe it's just because of the makeup of it. It was taken from just the one animal rather than having two, bred together, making a more successful, healthier baby. The Parthos, the Komodos that they've reported having over the years from every single zoo that has had a female lay parthenogenic clutches, which happens a lot. Okay,
It
with
does.
Komodos,
Did
it
it
happens.
just happen like a couple
Right,
weeks ago?
right, it happens a lot, and most of them die after a year or two. So I'm hoping my guys don't die, but I'm prepared for it just because I know that that might happen. Um, and maybe it might be part of the science. But I'm sitting on the clutch now. There's only 2 good eggs out of the 6 that came out. Um, and I'm hoping that they go the full distance. I just candled it the other day. It's about 2 months in. It was laid February 21st, so almost 2 months now. And the veins have come in, and you can see, as if you kind of flick the egg or tap the egg a little bit, you can see the slight movement of the embryo. So everything is fertile in there.
So
That's awesome.
do Partho eggs hatch at the same rate or develop at the same rate?
No, it's a lot. From what I'm experienced, 3 months slower.
Wow.
So I've had my last clutch hatch out at 149 and 151 days.
Holy crap.
That's incubated at 84, 85. I've incubated a tad bit colder, like 82, 83, which is not that much cooler, but all of the Partho eggs have gone a full distance of 200 days, 210 days for the last one.
Wow.
And I had one that died in the egg, my very, very last Partho clutch. I'm not sure why this one was much weaker, but so it went the distance. It went 160, 170 days, but all of a sudden it just didn't hatch. And so the egg started to smell and develop like red mold and stuff. And I felt that it was time to cut it, and so I sliced it. And basically the thing was fully formed and dead inside.
That's
So,
really unfortunate.
yeah, it happens. I've actually had a couple of them happen that way, but I'm I take it as I'm gonna get another one. They're gonna give me more, and they're gonna give me more and more.
Yeah.
So yeah, I at first I was like, man, I gotta keep them all or something like that, but it's not happening here.
Well, the likelihood of breeding is not everything comes to full term. Not everything hatches, and even the ones that do hatch, not all the babies are going to survive.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah, you basically gotta be prepared for life and death and all that, and yeah,
And they go
It's-
completely hand in hand.
right.
And as humans, we like to be as much in control as we can, but it just
Right.
does not work that way with live animals. It's
Yeah.
kind of just works out to be the way it works.
Right.
How many eggs do mangroves typically lay?
I'm getting as low as 3, but as high as 7. But I've seen some clutches from other people as big as 12.
Wow.
Yeah, and but mine have been pretty consistent at 5. Those are my typical clutch sizes, 5 or 6, maybe 4. I've had a female just give me 3 one time. Now, and whatever ratio, whatever number that they give me, it's typically just one that ends up going the distance. And it's weird too. It's it'll be the fully formed one. I'll call it right from the get-go. I'll be like, hey, it's the one that's not yellow and not all mutilated. It looks nice.
Yeah.
And that one will go the distance. And the other ones will start molding and smelling within the week, But yeah, every single egg that I get, I put into the cooker just because you never know.
Yeah.
Yep. It doesn't take much extra power and time to put them in the incubator to see if they do go or not, because it might be that one that you don't think is going to go,
Right.
and you get an extra baby out of it. So
Right. And if I were to listen to everybody and just be like, they're infertile because you never bred them, I'd never have the 2 or 3 parthos that I have,
exactly.
Yeah, you wouldn't have hatched them out at all.
Right. Yep. So yeah, it's just with keeping the parthenogenic and breeding, that's a project within a project, and I'm basically within the realm of it. I'd say that it's fertile, the parthenogenic one, but to be how strong and how strengthly, that's probably my next determination, or my next goal to try to figure out, which would be, if these things can breed or not. And I think they are. I think at any percentage, one egg or a couple eggs is still a good amount for a parthenogenic clutch. So
Yep.
Oh, absolutely.
Right now, I have the male breeding back to the mom, but I'm looking for another girl. Hopefully, the unrelatedness will help out with the fertility as well, maybe, and just to also make stronger babies too, with better bloodline rather than being bred back to the mom.
Yeah.
With the male being bred back to the mom, do you think that would affect the sex of the babies being hatched out in that clutch? Like more of a male-female variation opposed to all males?
I don't even know. I would say after that part, now that's breeding time, it should be fair game to have males and females. But with the monitors, that's their what is it called? That's the whole phenomenon or whatever that happens within monitor lizards, that typically ends up all male. So I actually have no idea. I'm gonna wait. The male is now just turning 2, so maybe he needs to be a tad bit more mature and be 3 years old, and maybe his sperm will be better. He's definitely not slowing down at all right now. He's still trying to go at it as we speak. I just fed them, so they're horny after they eat.
Attaboy.
Yeah, so basically he's still trying to go at it now, and I'm hoping that I do end up with a couple more clutches out of him, but I don't know. One is fine, or none is fine too, just because they're also pets too. I have to remember at the end of the day, even though I'm trying to do some of the most craziest things and there is a little bit of pressure on them, they're still my pets. And so I have to swallow whatever I fail or whatever I do and don't do with the project, and just remember they're just my pets, And that's where you keep the fun in. But if you just put so much pressure on them to breed, like I see a lot of people do, they spend a lot of money and they buy a pair of something, and within the first year or two, if they doesn't breed for them, they sell them,
Yeah.
rather than doing the hard work, or going out and figuring out the little things that may make it work for them. So that's where I try not to lose focus on them just being my pets, and all of a sudden it's about money, or all of a sudden it's about the fame or whatever, right? Notoriety or something like that. And then it's then not about the animals, then it's about yourself, and it's about your ego. And I'm sure I can say I'm the best at this, whatever, but there's still so much more to learn, or still so much more to do, and at the same time, it just they just need a lot more effort, and people that are really willing to go the distance for them.
Yeah, it seems that way with a lot of monitor species, and even a lot of snake species that aren't so common, that a lot of people just think it's overnight type deal where, hey, I'm going to keep this for a year, breed a bunch of them, make a bunch of money, and then that's it. That's not how it works.
It doesn't really work that way. People might get lucky once in a while, but that luck normally never happens 6 to 7 times in a row. It's
Exactly.
Yeah.
not
And
going to
then
work
also,
that
you
way.
don't want to overbreed your females and your males so that eventually they just wear out and die either. So,
Yeah.
because that happens a lot, unfortunately, with some like ball python species and other cards and stuff that are really common. People just
Right.
breed them year after year after year for like 10 years.
Yeah.
The
It really
animals just
does.
run out.
So like with mine, I've been learning to keep them where they're always in to breed. All I have to do is feed them or not feed them, actually. So let's say if I take one of my girls and she's on a strict schedule now, and from March and April and into May, she barely ate, right? And then I basically kept her just maintenance feeding, just enough, just to keep her on weight, but not too fat, but she's still very lean. Right now, what I'm gonna do is in June and July, mostly June, I'm gonna feed the hell out of her. Basically, take whatever she had as far as fat and anything like that stored away and double it, triple it, 10 times the amount.
Yeah.
Like, let's say if she's eating 2 fuzzies, she's now going to get 12. Okay.
Oh wow.
Right. Now that basically sends my girls into the cycle. That right there, 100%. It's because my monitors are very cute and they're very consistent throughout the year. So I don't really have to make too many weather changes, like how snake breeders have to cool their snakes down, or how some other lizard breeders, they have to cool their lizards down. All North American lizards need to be cooled down before breeding, typically. So with mine, because it's so hot, I'm just keeping everybody kind of hot. Now, I'm not keeping them extremely wet either. Okay, keeping them within these types of parameters all year round does not trigger them to breed whatsoever. Now, keeping them slightly dry, that basically gives their body a sense like, hey, it's always just good enough. So when it's really good, my body is gonna gear up and I'm gonna go into the breeding cycle. So not to say that I do this all year round and I try to get them to breed all year round, but I can. And I mean, I don't, but I can. I literally am triggering them to cycle every maybe 3 or 4 months, respectively giving them a chance to recoup. But some people literally breed the female 2 or 3 weeks after she's laid.
Wow.
To me that's a little too much, but it's been done, and my monitors have actually done it where they're all of a sudden cycling again. I'll take it to the vet and he'll be like, yo, didn't she just lay? And I'll be like, yeah. And she's like, she's going through this period again and she's developing follicles again, and it's literally only been less than a month. So it's a thing where now what I'm doing is I'm not going to feed her, and what I'm trying to do is battle and work against the cycle, because I don't want to have her go through it again. So
Wasting her resources.
what I'm basically limiting her resources. She still gets to drink, but her amount of food and the amount of fat is very, very limited. She gets shrimp and insects and fish rather than getting rats and mice that are much more fat. And then everything, like for a really big monitor lizard, I'll really give her one item, but I'll cut it into 5 little pieces. And so she thinks like she's getting a lot, but really it's not a lot. And I've tapered her down a little bit from that. I think in a way, I'm really trying to figure out my keeping style a little bit more better. I just moved down to Southern California about 8 months ago, or I don't know, like last August. So, it hasn't been a full year or a full cycle of me being down here yet. But it has been working in my favor. Where I was before in the Bay Area, it would get a lot colder, and so I would have to fight that cold weather by always turning on heat lamps. But here, since it's so hot, and I'm not really fighting at all. But at the same time, it's just allowing my animals to be kept in this condition, and they're just basically ready to go anytime. So yeah, it's to me it's difficult because I'm trying to I can trigger it, and it works as long as I'm consistent with feeding and not feeding. But right now, it's also at a point where it's making me trigger too much, and it's making them cycle way too much. So to be honest, I haven't been feeding my animals at all for the last 2 months because right now is where they're all cycling. And so they're all ready to go again as long as I feed them well enough. So everybody has literally been getting scraps and stuff like that just to keep them maintained, but nothing to fill them up,
They just want to be little baby making factories.
Yeah. And the thing is that with the room dynamic, they get to smell and see each other. So yeah, it's just sex all around. So
Mangrove orgy.
Yeah, basically where and the thing is that like some of them, like the males, get to see each other, so they're slightly like charging the glass a little bit, and the fact that they get to see each other aggravates the other one to dominate and basically mark his territory. And then my females, I'm not sure if it's like females following, like human females following each other's cycles, but because I also feed them the same, keep them the same, and they're all within the same room, they're basically all cycling at one similar time, or like back to back to back, or if one's going to do it, not too long after the other one's going to do it.
Okay.
So
what size of enclosures? Do you keep your mangroves in?
As babies, I do a little bit of like nerd style keeping, where I keep them very, very simple. It's so simple that all it does is it just has a water dish, some bedding that's a very, very thin layer, and I have maybe like a couple cork pieces, and that's it. They're subjected to me being around often. Now, if I just piled a bunch of hides in there and gave them like a foot of soil for a little darn baby, not that they'll get lost, they'll just hide all the time. And you'll basically never be subjected to me doing stuff around and getting basically desensitized, right?
It's going to be way more feisty.
Right. I do a major thing of desensitization with the mangroves because if not, horrible catches for the people I want to sell them to. And so then those people are just going to end up selling them. And I really don't want that, So it's just like nerd kind of sure that whoever's going to buy a baby from me, I try to work with it. I try to make sure that it's used to humans and being played with, not like a wild caught or something that's very, very skittish,
It's an animal that you can manage to work with.
Yep.
Right, exactly. And then you also, people want rewarding lizard, they don't want a lizard that's gonna, with the mangrove, the thing is that they hide all day. So, for a really bad one, they're gonna hide 24/7 or 23 out of the 24 hours out of the day. He's gonna come out to bath, take a shit, go right back in. And so, those animals right there, even them, I'll try to desensitize them. I keep them very limited on the hides. They just get to hide in maybe 1 or 2 cork tubes, but at the same time, the entrance of that tube is facing me, so I can peer inside, but they can also see me, but also feel safe within the confines of that tube. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Now, those small cages are like 2 by 2 or maybe 2 by 3 or 3 by 18, something like that. I raise them as babies in 20 gallons, 30 gallons, give or take, Then with once they have slightly grown out of that after several months, I move them into like a 4 by 2 by 2 or a 3 by 3, something like that, where they can grow out into their 2-foot range, maybe even closer to 3 feet. And then if they're going to top out and be just 2 feet, they can stay in there, or they can be moved into like a 5-foot or 6-foot each, right? But if they're a mangrove monitor that I know is obviously going to get really big and they're already just growing and growing and growing. They end up in 8-foot cages and 6-foot cages for me. I don't keep them too big of cages just because it's just too much to heat during the wintertime. Everything for me works logistically well as far as disbursement with whatever I have as far as lights. Anything too tall, I'll basically have to use too high of wattage bulbs. Makes my room spike too much, and then it's just So I use very, very low wattage bulbs in my room, but I use multiple. So like on one lizard, I have 3 bulbs having 150 watt. And it's just dispersed heat better. It's to have the light spectrum cover the entire lizard rather than covering just one spot of the lizard. So those are my parameters. Breeding is 2 6-foot closures next to each other. So that's basically a 2-foot closure with a glass partition or a little tube or a partition. Monitor can basically when it gets to the other.
It's cutting out really bad right now.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's your internet connection where you are right now, but it's cutting in and out a lot.
Okay, what about now?
Yeah.
Still a bit choppy.
Yeah.
That's weird. That's really weird. What about now?
Yeah.
We can hear you now.
Yep.
Oh, you can hear me, but you just can't see me?
No, the video's lagging a little bit, but we can at least hear you now where we couldn't make out what you were saying at all before.
Yeah. Like when you were talking about the light setup, it was cutting in and out there a little bit. So.
Okay. With the light setup, I basically have low wattage bulbs. And I have a bank where, 3 or 4 of them or 2 or 3 of them in a row. And rather than using one very high wattage bulb, I use 3 or 4 smaller wattage bulbs next to each other just to give the lizards a better full spectrum coverage of lighting over the animal rather than having like a 150 watt bulb that, is just a beam of light over the back. I want to cover the head, the body, and the tail.
So,
because that way you avoid getting hot spots. That way you don't burn the animal. I do very similar setup for my taggies because some people just use a single light, and that single light is going to have those little hot spots, and it'll cause burns on top of the animal. So using lower wattage light bulbs helps eliminate some of that risk.
And you use the halogen floodlights, don't you?
I use mostly floodlights. Yeah, it's they're to me they're the best. As far as heating up a big lizard goes, they're the best.
Do you use UV lights for mangroves too, or just the halogen bulbs?
I use UV for all the monitors, only because I'm trying to present, what we do with them is taken from the wild. It's collected information. So if I were to be promoting 100% of what I'm trying to gather from the outside and plug it into what they need in captivity, they're not a sun-chasing diurnal lizard, so they need UV, in my opinion. Just because if I'm gonna promote great soil or humidity or things like that, basking temperatures, why wouldn't I be promoting UV as well for a diurnal lizard? It just makes sense to me. There's 2 sides to this, or I just want to clarify. If you use calcium with D3 and you use a good amount of rodents and vertebrates in your diet, then you don't
high calcium diet.
Yeah, if you don't need UVB, but if you're using just insects and you're not using too much of the calcium dust, you're gonna notice your animal is gonna develop MBD and a soft bottom jaw, and he's gonna go downhill from there. That animal needs UVB, as well as vitamin D3,
Yeah.
So just to be clear, if you're not using UVB, then the amount of calcium and the amount of vertebrates you use needs to be high. But for me, I'm using UVB for color. I'm using UVB for helping them process calcium much better for the eggs. That's 100% why I use UVB though.
That makes sense.
That right there, and not only that, I'm promoting everything else that is from the wild. Data that I've taken or we've collected and we've shared. Why wouldn't you use UVB? So that's just me. I don't really try to force it upon people. It's whatever they feel like doing. If it's at a time where, and there's a couple cages here that don't have UVB, but I use a lot of calcium on them though. And most of my cages though, they either have a power sun next to the floodlights, or they have a UVB strip in there, the 5.0 UVB strip. I use that one over the power sun just because it covers the cage much better rather than having
lengthwise instead of just
right.
a spot.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so it
Covers
covers
more of the lizard
much
too.
better. Exactly.
I have a power sun for my monitor, but he's a little guy.
With my tag use, I run the 3 halogen bulbs, and then I run a 12% Arcadia bulb right next to it at the same height. So when the lizards are basking, they get a advantage of both, and they get covered fully.
Nice. Yeah. So that's a thing where I hope people take up more. Right now, it's a very big thing where, like in the hobby, people are just telling savanna keepers to just use insects, which is correct, but not completely. The correct term would be invertebrates, but that covers a much wider spectrum of animals to feed, like shrimp and many other things, like spiders or scorpions or things like that. But if you just say insects,
they're just limiting it to
just right. They're just going to think crickets and roaches, and the crickets and roaches are okay, but like a millipede or a scorpion or a giant arthropod of some type is going to be favored by that savanna monitor. And so I just want people to realize, hey, there's not a right or wrong. There's just a much more definitive answer. Yeah, much more appropriate definition to whether you need UV or don't need UV. It's just specific times.
Well, with all animals, they're exposed to some sort of UVB at some point during the day. Even if it's sometimes nocturnal animals, they'll kick out portions of their tail or a portion of their leg out of wherever they're hiding to absorb some of that UV. It might not be every day, like some diurnal or other crepuscular animals where they're getting a lot more sun. But
right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And like leopard geckos, I've seen a leopard gecko. I've had leopard geckos use UVB. Like they'll sit underneath it for whatever reason. Yeah, and so it's just something to think about. Like for a lot of keepers that are, I would say some people are trying to cheat their animals, or trying to cheat from spending $100 on a UV lamp. To me, I think that UV lamp is very, very useful.
It's a crucial part of their life, and because the sun just has so much benefits to them in the development of their bones and other aspects. It might not just be specifically for bone development. It could be coloration. It could be maybe the scales look better, and some other aspects as well too of the animal.
One thing I literally I was talking to another keeper about this, but a monitor lizard in a small enclosure that's dark. Picture you in a little enclosure, or you in the closet in some big giant cave. You're going to feel cornered, and you're probably going to not like your enclosure.
Yeah.
But if your enclosure is pretty well lit and it's a decent size, then you don't feel like you're trapped in some really dark closet with a little lamp in there.
Yeah.
You're probably going to feel a little bit better about where you live.
Yeah.
You know,
because the monitor the monitor probably feels like, hey, you're coming into my hide and this thing's going to try to kill me, versus like, hey, there's a dark space over there, I can go hide and I feel more secure.
Right. And so the whole flight distance with them, if they don't have flight distance, for one, they're out of options. And so their last option is to bite you, or their last option is to charge you, or whatever, or feel cornered. Yeah. And so I think that too is like with using UVB, or using a very well lit enclosure that is, allows the animal to feel comfortable in there. That's where I find using UVB also helps out as well.
Yeah.
Well, it's always good to have some kind of light cycle.
Yeah. I notice it gives my animals what you call basically just direction or schedule of the day.
Yeah.
And you can kind of predict that as well on like when they're going to do stuff, or when you can do stuff with them. But man, like let's say when my animals, they're sleeping, sure, they're dormant, or they're just not going to do a whole lot. But when the lights are on, they're on too, and so they're eating and breeding, and everything is within that time frame, because they know when the lights are out, they're basically asleep.
Yeah. I with my monitor, as soon as his light goes on, he crawls out from under the slate that he sleeps under, goes and sits on top of his pile of slate, gets the sun, gets warm, and then, after about 20-30 minutes, he goes and takes a couple laps around the enclosure, goes basks for a little while, starts running around like a little crackhead. He has his own routine. And it's based on when I flip that switch on and I flip that switch off. But I have never seen an animal that has like an actual routine that you can be like, oh yeah, he's gonna do this in like an hour, right? It's really cool observing like what he does.
Yeah.
No, it really is.
It's the same way with my taggies. Like in the morning, they'll come out around at like 11. They'll bask for an hour and a half, and then they'll start zipping around doing their daily activities. And then towards the end of the day, when they know the light's going to start going out, they'll bask more, like Cody McMillan said in the comments, before it starts to cool, so that they can still maintain that internal body temperature.
Right. Yeah, my animals, so like when the lights are all off right now. But right before the lights are going to go off, and it's 10, 11 o'clock a.m. So most of my lights turn off at noon, right when it starts to get really hot. They actually are, most of them are all right around the lamps at 10, 11 o'clock, right before they know it's going to flick off. And they're just grabbing that last chance to bask or whatever. And then they know that it's just lights off.
It's amazing how smart they are.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. They're it's like they don't have a clock, but their sense of time is pretty pinpoint.
Oh yeah.
Like my Kimberly's lights, I usually turn them on at 3 or 4 in the morning. And that's just because I'm already up at that hour doing like grasshopper stuff, and so when I turn them on, they'll come out in about 10 minutes or so. But let's say if I forget to turn them on and I'm looking at the cage at 6 o'clock or something like that in the morning, they're just sitting right there like, hey, what the hell? You forgot to turn
They're sitting
them on.
in their basking spot waiting. Yeah. I did that earlier this week with this guy. I was like, oh my God, my bad. It was like noon when I came to turn his light on. I was like, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. And he's just like sitting on his rock glaring at me. It's like,
yeah, he's like, dude, you forgot to turn on the lights.
It's like, hello, food idiot, you forgot me.
Yeah.
But, so tell us a little bit about your Kimberleys, because we've talked about the Mangroves.
So my Kimberleys, man, I got them because I can finally afford them. But I got them because basically I was also, as a kid, probably jockeying them or into them more than any other small monitor. I didn't realize that they were a dwarf and not, I mean, I did eventually, but when I was a very young kid, I didn't realize they were a dwarf because when I saw a big one, I was like, man, that's a good sized little monitor. But Kimberleys themselves can get like 2.5, 3 feet, even though most of that is tail. And so I really I was like, hey, I finally found this opportunity, found a decent price on some babies, and then jumped on it. And after that, though, I realized I was probably a little bit in over my head. Not to say that they're harder than my mangroves or anything like that, but they're different. I'm so used to my mangroves that I was kind of trying to, use whatever mental or whatever I've practiced with my mangroves for the Kimberleys. And some of it worked, but Kimberleys like it way different. They like it more. They like it more hotter.
Well, they're an arid species, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah. They like it hot, and I mean it's somewhat humid though. But they'd like it a lot more hotter. And then, as far as keeping the elegant tail and things like that, that was my hardest part. Was to make sure that the tail shedded completely every single time to make sure that the length was
didn't lose the tip.
Yeah, exactly. Didn't lose the tip and the integrity of it. And so it ended up losing the tips on both of them. They shriveled up. The tail tips are so thin, they're like thinner than a pencil, like a lead pencil. That's how thin the tips are. Right. And so they would literally whip around the enclosure and then they'll split the tip, and I couldn't do anything about it. So I basically just had to put some silver cream on it or some calcium dust to dry it off, and it just went from there. But they all have their toes, which I'm really glad about. That part I'm glad about. But the tail tips and everything like that, in my opinion now, looking at it, I probably should have kept them more humid. And see, that was the thing is, when you're doing your research, you think of Australia and you think of Kimberley, and it's like a dry, rocky scrub. Inside the crevices, though, where they live, is really humid.
That's a good point.
Yeah, that's what I learned. And so deep down in the soil and stuff like that, those crevices are just as humid as anywhere else, and they're small, so they're compact humidity.
Yeah.
And that's where I learned now is I basically drenched my soil. I don't have a ton. I do have nest boxes, but I don't have a ton of soil. Now I'm going to apply it just because I haven't been doing it yet and they haven't been breeding. So maybe if I give them more soil, more moist soil, they'll give me some action. But they're roughly 18, 20 months old now. Coming, I think another 3 or 4 months, they'll be that 2-year-old mark. And hopefully they'll get to go. But at this point, I either have a pair or 2 females. Gladly, I don't have 2 males, but I'm at good odds. Yeah, I'm at good odds. So.
Second male.
Oh, really? Yeah, I don't. So I'm at a pair right now, and I'm trying to figure out if my slightly smaller one is really a male or just a really subordinate female that hasn't really, matured at all. So I got that right there is a project in itself as well to just get them to breed. I'm doing a lot of things that I thought was correct. Like I keep them differently because even though they're in the same room, I'm just utilizing the heat. But they themselves, like this winter, they went through the winter, so I didn't fight it at all. I lowered the temperature by a little bit. They got to bask, but definitely not 140. Maybe like 100, 110. And that was it. And I barely fed them. Maybe once a week or every 3 days, and very, very small amounts of food. And the cage was still cold, and at nighttime it was still cold. And so I then warmed them back up, and they're still going through the warming period now. And just last week till today, I've been feeding them every day. Like as soon as I see them, I give them some roaches and give them some pinkies, and I try to basically get them in gear. But I'm still not seeing any action. But maybe I'll see some action once this weather is more consistent and not dipping back into the 70s. And so whenever it's cold and it does dip back into like the 70s during the daytime, I don't feed them. And so, I'm basically, because if I fed them, they'll just be storing that in their gut and not digesting it properly,
Yeah.
and they'll just get more sick and being overfed. So I try to keep it very, very. It's complicated, but for me, it's simple. It's literally just not feeding them. So
it's just about figuring that routine and figuring through climates that your animals need, because that's what a lot of people don't realize is they just go off a broad spectrum of, hey, they come from this area and it's this temperature all the time, but you're not taking into account for like the ground temperatures or those little crevices like you're talking about, what's behind that crevice and all that kind of other stuff that you don't initially look for.
Oh, I remember Brandon has a lot of Madagascar species of snakes, and the only Madagascar species of snake I have is my Dumeral's boa, and he was helping me out with a problem I was having with her, and we were actually looking at the different altitudes that they actually sit at to, try and fine-tune what was actually the issue with her, but we got her sorted.
Well, also on like the Madagascar island, I have a lot of giant hognoses and they cover such a wide range on the island. They could be locale specific. That's why some of them are differently colored, so on and so forth. But it's just like everything else.
Trial and error, figure it out as we go.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we really appreciate you coming on and spreading some knowledge about mangroves, because I had no idea there was that many locales of mangrove monitors.
Neither did I.
I thought there was like 5.
Yeah, they're like one of the most widespread. And the thing is that I can only talk about the ones that I know. There's all the ones that are on iNaturalist that are undescribed. There's a ton.
Yeah.
A ton. Every single pinpoint that people put up there. There's just so many. Yeah. Well, thank you guys very much for having me. I really appreciate meeting you guys and everything like that.
We appreciate you coming on and talking about monitors and your experience and a lot of the knowledge that you have. So hopefully it helps people who have mangroves. Because I know quite a few people, some of my friends have mangrove monitors. So maybe this will help them out and make it easier for them to keep and whatnot.
Nice. Yeah, so if anybody that's been paying attention, you guys are, I'm almost like an open book. You guys are welcome to message me, or if you yourselves, you two have any questions along the lines of like, monitor issues, or you guys run across some stuff that you guys need help with, I'm a message away.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll take advantage of that for sure.
And they would how would they find you? Just on Facebook or?
Just on Facebook. You guys can just give them my name and they'll be able to go through there without a problem.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, you guys have a great day.
Much.
You too.
We really appreciate Kai coming on and explaining mangroves. I learned a lot that I did not know about mangroves before. Yeah, that was
awesome.
That was a lot of information to take in too.
Yeah. It's really kind of interesting when those kind of episodes happen with us, when we're like not expecting it to be total information overload, and then me and you are both just sitting here like, oh my god, I have so many questions.
Yeah.
So like, Brandon and I are learning with all you guys, so we appreciate you guys listening, giving us the ability to share this knowledge within the herping community. We couldn't do it without you guys, so thank you for your continuous support as usual. Don't forget to grab Life by the Hemipenes.
And follow us on Facebook, Instagram. You can email us at chp.podcast@gmail.com. And all our live streams will be uploaded to YouTube. So if you want to check those out you can check them out on YouTube, and they'll be posted to Facebook as well. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, guys.